Wow, thank you all so much. Ralph, my dear friend, thank you for that warm introduction and for your love and friendship and for your prayers. To each and every one of you who's prayed for me during this last year and my family, I can't thank you enough, because the power of prayer is real. The miracles that God performs are real, and I saw them. I saw them that day on the ball field. For many reasons, I shouldn't be here if you look at what happened that day, except for miracles and the grace of God. And so I pray every day, I thank God every day, and I thank all of you for those prayers. There is a lot to pray for, but also to be thankful for. If you look at where we are right now in changing the direction of our country, my dear friend Marsha Blackburn just spoke, and boy, won't she make a great senator from the great state of Tennessee. You know, Marsha's one of those champions. We fought a lot of battles together. When I was chairman of the Republican Study Committee, she was right there with me when we led a lot of efforts to expose what was going on at Planned Parenthood. She chaired that select committee to get the facts out, to alert the nation to what had really gone on and how it uncovered and exposed people and really, I think, shocked so many people that this is something going on in our country and it's got to be stopped. Do you know that because Marsha went and exposed this during her campaign, she was actually banned from Twitter? Go back just a few months ago when Marsha put an ad up on Twitter that just exposed the truth about Planned Parenthood. Twitter took the ad down. They banned her. I said there was nothing better to alert the country at just what's going on. If you think there might be a culture war in this country, the fact that the left and even people in organizations like Twitter and Facebook were literally trying to suppress conservative speech. People are seeing it now because of social media. You sure didn't hear about that on the mainstream media, but because there's so many different ways to get our message out, it has allowed conservative voices to be even louder and magnified. And it's one of the reasons that Donald Trump is president today and doing a great job of standing up for our conservative values. You can just look at Neil Gorsuch. I really think that opening on the Supreme Court, as deep of a loss as losing Antonin Scalia was, one of the giants of this movement of constitutional representation on the Supreme Court. People that are there to actually interpret the Constitution, not try to write their own law. The fact that opening was there and the country knew you're not only electing a president, but you're electing somebody who's going to help shape the court for another generation. Nobody needed to ask Hillary Clinton what her list was going to be. Donald Trump put out a list, by the way. He was criticized by some for doing it. I thought that move alone helped enough swing voters to make a decision that understood what that opening meant, and they looked at Donald Trump's list. And Neil Gorsuch was probably the best person on that list, and there were other great people on that list. And maybe we'll see a few more of them on the Supreme Court before he's done. But in the meantime, again, Hillary Clinton never was asked by the media what her list would be because you didn't have to know. You knew what the philosophy would be of her pick. And so what a contrast that's been. Seeing Scott Pruitt here, who's a great friend and a champion for getting this economy back on track and restoring the rule of law in the regulatory state. The regulatory state under Obama had been crushing this country. We were losing manufacturing jobs by the thousands every single day because of radical rules and regulations coming out by agencies like the EPA, the NLRB, the IRS, the whole alphabet soup of agencies that were wrecking this economy. And when Donald Trump came in, he said a number of things. By the way, if you look at what he promised during his campaign, he's carrying through on every one of his promises. How refreshing that is. And so when I came back from the hospital, immediately we dove in to tax reform, to be able to work with President Trump on a bill to actually cut every single tax rate, from the highest rate to the lowest rate, eliminating the lowest rate, doubling the child tax credit, repealing, by the way, the House version of the bill fully repealed the death tax, complete repeal. We also had in the House bill a complete repeal of the Johnson Amendment, something that tries to stifle free speech in our churches, something we need to get back to. Jody Heiss and I led the effort to put in play. You can applaud that because we're not done fighting to repeal the Johnson Amendment. In fact, I've got a bill with Jody Heiss, the Free Speech Fairness Act, that would truly restore this whole idea that the IRS can threaten to take away the tax-exempt status of churches based on what they say at the pulpit. And then, of course, they don't even fairly administrate it. We need to repeal the Johnson Amendment, and we're going to keep working to do that. Something else I want to talk to you about that's so critically important in this November's election. And if you ever wondered why elections matter, I'm not going to say that this 2018 election is the most important in the history of our country, because it's an important election, the most important election in the history of our country, really in our generation, was 2 years ago in 2016, getting Donald Trump elected president with majorities in the House and Senate to truly allow us to save this great nation. And so we set out to do a number of things. And this tax cut bill is incredible at getting our economy back on track, at having working families, not, according to Nancy Pelosi, have crumbs, but to actually have the money to maybe go on a vacation, to buy your first home. It's real success. It's real. And by the way, I love the fact that Nancy Pelosi is reminding everybody that she will run for Speaker again if they get the majority, because it's a reminder of what's at stake in November. But she also said she would raise your taxes. She wants to undo this great tax cut bill that's working. I mean, think about it. We pass a bill that transforms our economy. It gets people hired again. It gets people with more money in their pocket. And what's her answer? She should be applauding it and saying, hey, Donald Trump got something right that she could agree with. Instead, she said she wants to reverse it. And she joined with Bernie Sanders and other radicals on the left to say that's what they would do. So it's important the country knows what the two different agendas are, because we want to keep working with President Trump. You know what happened? We passed a bill last year in the House to completely repeal Obamacare. And in that bill, it was a repeal and replace bill that got rid of Obamacare but replaced it with market reforms. We can actually have a healthcare marketplace where you can buy what you want at affordable costs. But you know what else we did in that bill? We completely defunded Planned Parenthood, completely defunded it. And we passed that bill through the House. And we can't fully celebrate yet because that bill didn't become law. You know why? Because 3 Republicans voted no. By one vote, that bill failed. Do you know that we've got the opportunity to flip at least 5 seats in the Senate from Democrat to Republican? We've got to come back next year with a House Republican majority and increase numbers in the Senate and get that bill passed to President Trump's desk to completely repeal Obamacare and defund Planned Parenthood. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I want to thank you all for what you do to defend the values of this country. Because if you look at what the Faith and Freedom Coalition is about, it's to restore those values that made this country great. This is the greatest country in the history of the world, but it didn't happen by accident. This country was created in a deep belief that we're a nation founded under God. It was talked about by our founding fathers. There are people who have been trying to take God out of every element of our society for decades, and you know what's at stake. You stand up and fight to defend it, but we've got to remind people all the time that this country was founded under God, this whole idea of a separation between church and state. Oh, look, I want to read you a quote from Thomas Jefferson, and you can go see this on the Jefferson Memorial. God, who gave us life, gave us liberties. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? That was Thomas Jefferson. This is a nation founded under the belief of God. Look, when I was shot and I started crawling away from the gunfire, and then all of my body gave out and I couldn't crawl anymore, the first thing I did was prayed. I started to pray to God. I said, God, there's nothing else I can do. I'm asking you for help. And I put it in God's hands. And I prayed for very specific things. The first one, I have a 10-year-old, she's now 11-year-old daughter. And I prayed to God, I said, God, please don't let Madison have to walk up the aisle alone. It's the first thing that came to my mind. And then I prayed that I could see my family again. And I prayed for a number of other things. And you know, God delivered on every one of those prayers. As Ralph said, it's a miracle. It's a miracle not only that I'm here, but that the other dozen-plus members of Congress that were on that ball field that day, that shooter went out to execute. It would have been a massacre of unbelievable proportions. But it didn't happen for a lot of reasons, because the United States Capitol Police were there and did their job while shot themselves, continued firing back to take the shooter down, so many other miracles that happen that you can just go and look. And one of them you can maybe say, wow, that's a coincidence. And then the other. And the first shot was at Trent Kelly from Mississippi, and it hit a link in a chain link fence. And you can still go to the ball field today and see that link broken. And the bullet was headed right at his head, and it whizzed right by his ear because of that link in the chain link fence. That is a miracle of God. They were... I'll just say one more because it's important to know God's presence so you can point it out. We can all talk about it, you know it, but you talk to friends that maybe don't understand or have that same conviction. And when you're explaining to them why it's so real, why the power of God's presence in prayer is so important, just remember those real life examples of miracles. And we've seen them throughout our lives, but I experienced them. You know, one of the miracles, I was being taken to George Washington Hospital in an ambulance at 7:15 in the morning in Virginia traffic. The ambulance had the lights on and they weren't moving. I was about to bleed out. I had, by the way, a 0 blood pressure when I arrived at the hospital. Now, most doctors will tell you that you're done. They had to put 20 pints of blood in me. But if they would have driven me to George Washington Hospital, I would have never made it. But the driver, the EMT on the ambulance saw a helicopter coming. And he said, that must be for him. Let's turn around and go back to the ball field. They got out of the traffic that wasn't moving, drove back to the ball field. The helicopter landed on the ball field. They switched me over. 4 minutes later, I'm in the emergency room at MedStar Hospital, and they saved my life. It's a miracle. Those are miracles of God. The reason I'm saying this, it's important for us to fight this battle. We know what's at stake in this great nation. But as we're fighting to know those real world examples and to remind us every day why we're doing this, why we get up and go knock on doors in the hot summer in a state like Missouri or in a state like West Virginia or in a state like North Dakota, where we're trying to flip these important seats to take back this country one seat at a time, one vote at a time. I appreciate what y'all have done to fight this battle and what you're going to continue to do, and for the leadership, Ralph Reed and so many others who have been committed to it, and take the fire, take the heat from the other side. But we know why we're in it. We know why we're in this fight. We're going to keep winning this fight. Thank you for what you do, and God bless each and every one of you.